Kia ora koutou. Hello, everyone. I'm Paolo Bertolin, the Artistic Director of Whanau Marama, the New Zealand International Film Festival 2024. Continuing this series of short interviews with the filmmakers that have been invited to the festival and specifically invited to our Fresh competition, a competition that is featuring some of the most exciting narrative debut of the last 12 months. And I'm particularly glad to welcome this time the director Mahdi Fleifel, who is the director of To a Land Unknown, a fantastic film that was presented at the Directors Fortnight this year and was one of the most applauded debuts in Cannes. I am really convinced that this is one of the most striking works that combine cinematic strength and a political statement as well. And as I'm doing with all the other filmmakers that we have been meeting, I would like to ask Mahdi if he could share with us his own introduction to the film in terms of the narrative and in terms of how the film stands in his choices as a filmmaker. So, Mahdi, thank you so much for this interview, and please, I pass the mic to you.
Thank you, Paolo, and thanks. Hi, everyone in New Zealand. Thank you so much for attending my screening. The film is really a work of passion. I've worked on this piece for 12 years, and it's a story of two friends, Palestinian cousins who flee the Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon, hoping to make it to Europe and start a new life. And as they cross the gateway to Europe, which is Greece, they find themselves stranded on the streets of Athens, and they're trying to figure out a way out. I would say it's inspired by many things that I grew up loving. Literature, Lord of the Flies, Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, Men in the Sun by Ghassan Kanafani, the Palestinian writer. And then cinema, films that I'm a child of the 80s, but I really picked up on 70s Hollywood cinema, that independent cinema that came out as the studio system was falling apart. And there was a little gap for about a decade or so where these young filmmakers just, made some of the most interesting films, perhaps overly masculine. But I think this is something that I wanted to embrace in this film, and in particular that urban, if we focus it a bit more than just 70s Hollywood, urban New York 70s cinema, the Sidney Lumet, Scorsese, Brian De Palma, and this is what I wanted to celebrate now that I had an opportunity to make my own film, to pay homage to a film that I felt was missing in today's landscape.
Oh, thank you so much. This is very impressive and consistent with what many critics have remarked, exactly this feeling of recalling a lot of the great classic of the 70s. But at the same time, this is a film, as you mentioned, that portrays two strongly affecting characters that are played with great commitment by Mahmoud Bakri and Aram Sabah. I think they come out as truly unforgettable. Can you tell us a little bit about the design of these two housings and the work with your actors?
I would say the characters are actually very much based on, like, Shatila and Reda in To a Land Unknown are George and Lenny in Of Mice and Men. Physically, Lenny is different than Reda, but in the script, I had initially envisioned him as this big mountain of a guy, like he's described in Steinbeck's story. And so you have the doer and the thinker. It's this kind of the buddy movie is also an aspect or a film that I grew up loving, in particular from the 80s. And so I had that in mind from the get-go. And then obviously when casting comes in play, you don't always get what you want, but sometimes you get something better. What you always hope, you know, filmmaking is sort of, you have this script, which is essentially a shopping list. You go to the supermarket or to the market and you hope to not only get what's on the list, but find the good deals. And so in a way, I was lucky to discover, I had Mahmoud in mind. He had done a brilliant audition, and so he was secured early on as Shatila. But then the question was, who's going to be Reda? And you know, it was a strange thing where we had already cast someone from Jordan, and about a week before we started production, he couldn't get a visa to come to Athens and work with us. It put the whole production under a lot of stress, many sleepless nights. And then one day, my sound recordist, who was from Palestine, said, you know, there's this kid, Aram Sabah. Do you know him? And I had met him. Aram is a skater, very famous skater from Ramallah. And I thought, gee, yeah, that could maybe work. Although he's skinny and he's nothing physically like I had imagined Reda be. But we did a Zoom audition with him and Mahmoud, and immediately you could tell there was a chemistry between them. And then, thanks to the fact that he has a Colombian passport, his mom is Colombian, he was able to come to Athens without a visa, and he flew in 3 days before. And yeah, I mean, now it's sort of like, it's as if he was meant to be. I mean, he was meant to be in this film, and it's, yeah, it's those things that happen sometimes that are beyond you, but they're just one of these wonderful surprises, and we were very, very lucky.
In terms of the story, this film, as you mentioned earlier, addresses the plight of refugees or people escaping from the home country, looking for a better place where to stay, a sort of land unknown that is nowhere to be found, probably. And in particular, of course, this is a specific story that addresses the plight of the Palestinians. Can you comment on how you wanted to discuss or address these political aspects in your film?
Well, I think for me, filmmaking or any creative endeavor has to be very personal. And so I'm the child of refugees. My parents are, you know, my father was born in a tent in 1952, 4 years after the Nakba. And so I was way more privileged. I was born in Dubai in an air-conditioned apartment because my parents had moved there to work. And then when I was 9, we went up north. We migrated to Scandinavia, to Denmark. So today I'm a privileged refugee. I have a Danish passport. Um, I'm Palestinian, but I'm also European, and there's a certain freedom that comes with that. Most of the Palestinians I know who are still in Lebanon or in Palestine are stateless. Even the ones who live in Israel are stateless in a sense that they live in exile in their own country because they're at the mercy of an occupier. And that's the reality. Horrible as it is, what we're witnessing now, I think there's an awareness about the issue that I have not experienced in my life before. And I think, you know, change can only come from awareness, and we need to just, you know, call a spade a spade. But I wanted to focus, you know, I always feel like if I get an opportunity to tell a story, you know, I want to zoom my lens on something that I feel like only I can contribute. You know, there's so many things, so many stories being told about, you know, the the idea is that the winners get to tell the story, and so you have all these, you know, Oppenheimers and the films about the Second World War, First World War, Dunkirk, Churchill bios, you know, all these multi-million-dollar films that don't only cost a lot of money, but are also have a lot of money in terms of like publicizing them and pushing them out to the audiences. I was mostly making documentaries because that's sort of the means that I had at hand after finishing film school. And there's a saying that Palestinian reality is stranger than fiction. So most of the films I did up until now were documentary about, you know, dealing with the present, what is happening in the here and now. And so I just count myself really lucky that I got this opportunity to make a small film. I mean, our budget, if I tell you, it's ridiculous in comparison to some of the films that are being put out there. So but it was a labor of love, and we were a team that really, you know, didn't take no for an answer. There was a lot of no's along the way. And people who were sort of, well, do we really need another refugee story? We have so many already. And you know, you have to sort of convince them that this is not just another refugee story. It's a, you know, it's a thriller. It's a genre film. It's a buddy movie. It has humor. It's filmmaking is not easy, but I'm only stating the obvious.
Well, thank you so much, Mahdi, for sharing these important views, not only on your film, but how cinema can contribute in telling stories and telling history. I hope this will help our audiences to better appreciate your film. And I hope to find, again, our audiences in other interviews in this series. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.